Good morning everyone, Gajan here again, and yes, the X-Pro3 has arrived. I've been waiting for this for almost 2 years, so you can expect a ton of content. And in this video, I'm gonna talk about my custom button layout for the X-Pro3. Let's get this started. Welcome back everyone, and the X-Pro3 review is coming soon, but as many of you would have guessed, I don't do reviews in a week or a couple of days. No, I need a good month with this thing in multiple environments to really push it through its paces to tell you what I like, what I love, and what I don't like about this camera. But because it is such a big deal for me personally, and maybe some of you watching, I have a ton of content planned. With that out of the way, let's talk about the custom button layout. So with this camera, there aren't as many buttons to customize as before. As you can see right away, there's no directional pad anymore, so you're gone with 4 custom buttons there. The AEL and AFL is combined into one button compared to the XT3, so you lose a button there. The front dial doesn't click in anymore, so technically you lose a button there as well. Well, let's talk about the buttons that we do have. So let's fire this thing up. Again, if you press and hold display, it'll bring the option to customize the buttons on your Fuji camera. I'm gonna go through this one by one and hopefully it makes sense to you guys. So we have the function 1 button right here at the top of the camera. For this, I have thought about this before making this video. I'm gonna choose the ISO auto setting. So basically with a quick click, I can keep looking through the viewfinder and change what ISO setting I'm at, whether it's ISO auto setting 1, 2, or 3, and those ranges will differ depending on what you set it. So I can set it to 800, 1600, and then 6400, depending on what environment I'm shooting in. So for this front function button that's located on the lever where you switch between EVF and OVF, I'm gonna set that to face and eye detect setting. So there should be an option here. Let's go ahead, face detection on and off. So while still looking through the viewfinder, depending on the subject, maybe I'm in a studio environment, I can choose whether I want face detection on really quickly. Now, there's another function button right above the Q button here, and I like that this Q and function button, there's more of an accent here away from your thumb, so you shouldn't be able to hit that accidentally like you do on the X100F. So for this button, I'm gonna set it to white balance. I like setting the white balance depending on what environment I find myself in. I rarely use auto white balance because I've had issues with it in the past and it does slow down my workflow. So this custom function button, I'm gonna set that for white balance. Now there is a touchscreen on the back, and while I'm not gonna be using it a lot, inherently because of the design of this thing, I still want some settings here that I would use if I'm finding myself in certain environments, or I quickly want to bring it down, set it, and then bring it back up. So for swiping up, I'll leave that at the histogram. For swiping to the left, I'm gonna bring that for high speed settings in case I want to shoot something in slow motion up to 120 frames per second in HD. So full HD high speed recording. Swiping to the right, I'm gonna have it change my shutter type. So switching between mechanical or electronic shutter. Something that I'm not gonna do often, but just in case, it's quickly accessible. Swiping down, I'm gonna leave that to bring the equilibrium, the level here, so I can quickly check something if this is on a tripod, or even if I'm handheld and I wanna make sure that the level is right or creatively in the way that I want it. The auto exposure, autofocus lock, I've been toying with this because of the exaggerated reach that is required now to go to this button. I don't think I'm gonna do back button focusing. I'm gonna try to use the shutter. So for now, I'm gonna leave this as auto exposure and autofocus lock. I'm gonna leave that as is, and we'll see. Maybe I'll change it depending on what my use case is, but because it requires more intention to get to that button, I'm gonna leave that for auto exposure, autofocus lock. Now, the back radial dial, I'm gonna set that up to choose between my custom profiles. So let's go ahead and find that here. Select custom setting. That's where it is, select custom setting for that. So what I should be able to do is press this button and it'll let me scroll through my 7 different custom profiles. Now, A lot of people have been talking about the sub LCD and talking about the nostalgia and seeing the simulation that you're in and how it's a gimmick and how it's maybe a great gimmick or all that kind of stuff. When you use this in practice, even in my brief time with it, this has been a game changer in that I inherently know what aperture I'm at because I've set it. I know what shutter speed I'm at because I've set it. And I know what ISO I'm at or in the range of because I've set it. So I don't really need to know what settings I'm at because the way I shoot, generally, I know where I'm at. And if I've relinquished some of the smarts to the camera, so if I say, hey, let me go aperture priority and it's really bright out and I know the shutter speed is gonna be well over 1/60th, or I know that the noise is gonna be 800 or less because I've set it such, I don't have to think about those settings anymore. But what I do need to think about is creatively, these JPEGs or even the film simulation associated with the raw files, I would like to know what style I'm shooting in. I'd like to know that if I am shooting acros, it's not just acros that I'm shooting in, it's that acros custom profile that I have set and the recipe around that and how the shadows, the highlights, the sharpness are all impacted around that. So it's not just telling me that I'm shooting in acros, I'm shooting in my acros, my version of acros. This is something that hasn't been talked about. It's kind of surprising, and it's also not, because a lot of people haven't spent time with this camera or extensive time with this camera or have the extended experience with Fujifilm cameras to think about it in this way. I use the Fujifilm for the work that I do. I do a lot of content around Fuji, so I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal here. It's just that when you're thinking about a lot of these features, more often than not, there's some sort of deeper association that goes with this thing that the engineers have thought of that isn't apparent right off the bat. So with respect to that sub LCD on the back and showing you what film simulation you're at, it can be, and I mentioned this in my early reaction video, it's more than just a film simulation. It's your custom profile that you're in. The Q button, I'm gonna leave that as a Q button for now, just because it does have a visual indication that's the Q button, and I can quickly go there and switch between 4, 8, 12, or 16 settings. Right now I have it at 8. I like that simplicity of it, but again, Q for Q. So there you have it, guys. Those are my custom settings for the X-Pro3, but more importantly, let me know what you have your settings set to. What are the quick shortcuts that you have and why? As you guys know, I respond to all of your comments, and let me know if you have a better recommendation than what I have laid out. Stay tuned for more great content around this camera in the coming weeks, and those of you that are getting already bored of this, I'm sorry, but listen, there's always a ton more great content outside of the X-Pro3 that's in the pipeline as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Gajan, and I'll see you next time.